This Marina Life with MDL Marinas.
Hello and welcome to another episode of This Marina Life from MDL Marinas with me, the marine podcaster, Ceri Hurford-Jones. For this episode I'm talking to some more of MDL's tenants who, I hope, will provide you with an insight into the options available to develop your boating skills, whether that be motor or sail powered. In this episode we'll find out what training is available and why you should consider honing your boating skills. First up today is Paul Glatzel, the director and principal of a training school called Powerboat Training UK, based at MDL's Cobb's Quay Marina. I started by asking Paul to give me an overview of his business and what exactly his team can offer.
We've been at Cobb's for over 20 years now, teaching people how to drive their powerboats, their motor cruisers, their jet skis, and also doing the theory qualifications for people who have sailboats as well. We don't teach on sailboats, there are other schools for that, but our expertise is teaching on things generally that push themselves along with an engine rather than anything else.
How unique is a school like yours catering for the motorboat industry?
There are a lot of them around, if I'm honest. There are very few that have been around a long time. We were proud enough to be authors of the Our Way Powerboat Handbook and the Advanced Powerboat Handbook, and we do a lot of mixed leisure and commercial law enforcement military training. So we're a sort of very active right through the year school, but we're still family run, and that makes a big difference as well.
So let's talk about the nub of today's podcast, which is how important formal boat training actually is for new boat owners, well, even existing motorboat owners.
Absolutely essential. At the end of the day, people have boats generally because it's a leisure activity. I sort of said we did a lot of training for commercial military users. Obviously, those people are using their boats for work reasons, but the majority of MDL marinas are full of people who have worked hard to finance the vessel that they've got there, and they want to have fun with their family. They want to have that fun safely, and training really is a key contributor to having an enjoyable time with your boat, to using it more, to making it relaxing, and ultimately using it as much as possible and keeping it and upgrading it.
Yeah, it is about getting the best out of the boat and, as you say, enjoying it safely, and your family also feeling that you know what you're doing on a boat.
Well, I'm sure we've both spent long enough around marinas, Ceri, to see those sort of fairly fractious relationships at the end of a day afloat where partners are shouting at their other partner about this line and that line, and people are jumping on pontoons and the kids are looking frazzled. And at the end of the day, if we can contribute to that being a more relaxing coming alongside that just brings that great day afloat to a positive crescendo, then frankly everybody's going to enjoy being on that boat, and they're going to want to go boating more, and that actually makes boating cheaper, doesn't it? The more we use it, the less it costs.
A very, very good point, Paul. And that whole thing about also it gives confidence to other boat owners around you as well.
Well, yeah, again, we've all been in those marinas where we take a boat into marina, we always think everybody else is sitting there watching us, waiting us to fail. Now, the reality is everybody's sat there in that predicament before with a bit of wind and tide catching them out. And the more we can make that relaxing for those around in the adjacent berths, then it's sort of works for everybody, doesn't it?
Now, those of us in the know the answer to the next question, but there will be people listening to this podcast who don't know about the actual legal requirements for actually running and driving a motorboat. What are the legal requirements, Paul?
It's sort of slightly varied insofar as for vessels up to 24 metres in the UK used for pleasure, then there isn't a requirement to have qualifications. However, what you might find is that your insurance company insists on it. So in a qualification sense, it may well be that there isn't a requirement for qualifications. However, what you do have very clearly as a skipper is a duty of care to those that you have on board and equally those around you. And you therefore need to operate, to navigate, to control your boat in a way that keeps your boat and other boats safe. And if therefore you do something and you come a cropper, then the authorities may choose to actually look at that, and then they can prosecute. And indeed there are elements within the Merchant Shipping Act that can be used to hold you account for your failure to keep people safe.
Very, very valid point. And the whole section of professional development and professional licensing, of course, could take a whole podcast all by itself. But briefly, you as a school can handle pretty much any qualification required. Is that right?
Very much for the power-driven sector and all the supporting theory qualifications, and for the commercial sector as well. But I think a lot of the time it's not about formal RYA qualifications. It's about spending time understanding your boat. We do a lot of training in Cobb's Quay and equally the other MDL marinas where we're jumping on for a half day or a full day, just looking at enhancing people's ability in a close quarter situation. And that really comes down to understanding how your boat reacts to wind, how it reacts to tide, and how you can sometimes do less to achieve more in terms of more use of neutral, giving yourself more thinking time, having a more planned, structured approach to approaching berths. And that in itself then creates that, as we've already said, that more relaxed, easier approach to actually doing things in a marina.
And it's not just about boat handling, it's also about people management as well, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And that, I would say, it's a really good point, actually, Kerry, because I think it's one of the things that so many people fall foul of. Because let's say you're coming back into the berth at the end of the day. What you need to do as a skipper is to brief. You need to tell people what the expectations are, which might be turning around to everybody who's, come on board with you for the day and say, look, guys, if you don't mind, we'll be back alongside in 10 minutes. Could I ask that you stay off your phones, you just sit? I'm going to ask sort of Joe there at the back to assist me with the lines, but I'd like all of the rest of you to stay seated, to keep out the way, to keep quiet, because I just need to fully engage my brain with getting back into this berth just to make sure, we get alongside and then we can head up to the marina bar. And I think that sort of brief and expectation management makes a big difference versus you're just coming alongside and someone's phone goes and the kids start screaming about their iPad losing charge or whatever. If you manage your boat proactively, it makes your life easier.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the courses your school actually offer then and the typical duration of each. Perhaps you can give us an overview, Paul.
Yeah, well, you can break it down into sort of fundamentally, the RYA have two schemes for the motor side of things. They have what's called the Powerboat scheme and what's called the motor cruising scheme. And in the old days, you had small whizzy little Fletcher powerboats and you had big wooden motor cruisers that sort of like chugged along. Nowadays, you have many, many boats that fall into both categories, sort of fast, outboard powered, twin engine day boats, which might be 40, 45 foot. And frankly, people don't spend much time staying on them. They just use them to get out for the day. So for the powerboat, the smaller sort of sub 10 metre-ish sort of market, the bog standard course for people to do is RWA Powerboat Level 2. And that gives them some basic core skills to leave the marina, to head along some channels, go to the beach, anchor, have a nice time, get back safely. It gives them the charts, the tides, the buoyage, the collision regs, understanding to do that safely. So it doesn't make you the best boater in the world, but it gives you the core skills, the building blocks of competence to go out and actually use your boat. And then you have equivalent qualifications at the bigger boat end, and that would typically tend to be the RWA Day Skipper Practical course, and that's a 4-day course for those with a little bit of experience. And then you've got underlying courses like the VHF radio course, Day Skipper Theory, which can be online or you can do in a classroom. And all of these things come together to develop that skill set. And frankly, any RWA training centre will be able to talk to you about what works. But one of the key things is, we're a powerboat and a motor cruising centre. There are many centres like that, but it's making sure that the centre has the instructors that has the experience on your sort of boat, because there's no point in me it would be sort of foolhardy and terrible of me to put someone who's only got experience on a 4-metre boat on a 20-metre boat, because they're not going to be able to demo and instruct properly. So that gives a rough overview.
Just to confirm, these guys and girls who are instructors are time-served, water-based people who had to go through qualifications themselves.
Yeah, and the RWA schemes, actually, you look around the world at the competitor schemes, and there really aren't that many, but the RWA scheme just works. And you've got the base qualifications that we've talked about for the owners of boats at MDL Marinas, but the instructor qualifications are a really core part of that as well. And people have to have a certain amount of experience. They then have to go through an instructor qualification. As they get more senior in their instructor qualifications, they have to be examined by an external RWA MCA examiner. So there are lots of checks and balances. That doesn't mean that every instructor can drive and demonstrate on every boat. So you need to make sure that the instructor you've got coming to you is competent on that sort of boat. But then that's something that you'll get a flavour from speaking to the schools that you actually speak to.
Now, this next area, we could probably spend a good couple of hours talking about that whole thing about analogue training and digital training. And I think the question really has to be about the difference between classroom training and that out on the water. but also about this technology issue. Now, before we started this podcast, you mentioned to me something about tin cans. Perhaps you'd like to just explain to me what it is you do.
Well, we were just having a little bit of a talk earlier about trying to get my headset working, which didn't end well, shall we say. But we were talking about how on a VHF course we go back to some real old basics, and those a little bit more long in the tooth will remember a couple of tin cans with a piece of string between them that many of us spent our youth enjoying in our back gardens. And we have a couple of sets of those because they're quite handy teaching aspects of VHF communication about how we have to move our VHF radio, either sort of we can listen to or we can transmit. We can't do both on the same time, that there are single frequencies on some channels like channel 16 or dual frequencies on others. So tin cans and old school is sometimes a great way to get things across. And that leads neatly anyway into, I think where your question's going in terms of the whole thing about electronic chart navigation and paper charts and the changes afoot in that industry.
How do you get that across in the classroom? Because it's not that long ago that both the government's agency and, of course, IMRE both announced they're not producing paper charts anymore.
It's one of those things that you see online and there's a little bit of an uproar there in terms of, and the paper chart's not been around. But the reality is you wander around any MDL Marina and ask people how many paper charts they've bought in the last 5 years, and you'll get quite a lot of blank stares. Quite often people have the paper chart for their very local area, but beyond that they don't, and it's more often than not updated. So, like in our cars with electronic charts rather than the maps we used to use, the reality is electronic charts on our chart plotters are the way it's happening, and we as a centre, as many others, all embrace that by the use of electronic charts on courses. But it's important, with any technology, is to understand what it's really good for and what some of the limitations are. And that's one of the real challenges with using electronic charts over and above paper charts, is understanding those limitations.
So the question continues about the differentials between classroom-based training and that out on the water. You need a bit of classroom time to really go and get the best out of your time on the water training, I believe. Yeah,
it's about striking a balance between the two. There's a need to have theory, understanding about stuff, and then there's a need to go and put it into practice. Now, we could spend the whole day in the classroom talking about how you handle a boat, but at the end of the day, you're going to learn it by being on the water, doing it, seeing the instructor do stuff, and then you copying that and practicing it. So it depends what you're actually looking at, and there will be elements of the courses that need to have a little bit of theory in the classroom, and then you go afloat and you're doing it all. Equally, there will be courses where you might spend the whole week in the classroom, like the Day Skipper Theory course. So it depends what objective you're seeking to satisfy. One of the great things about the Our Way scheme, and it's interesting to contrast sometimes the Our Way scheme with those from overseas in Europe, is you take Powerboat Level 2 and the Our Way's aim is approximately sort of 75% of that course you're spending on the water. You take the comparable courses overseas and sometimes they're 95% in the classroom.
Wow.
And at the end of the day, hands-on practical on your boat, you can't do on a rainy Tuesday night when you're sitting on your laptop. You can do the theory, you can look at YouTube videos, you can research stuff online. We want to get you afloat and boat driving for the relevant parts of the training.
And in many ways, this is about self-development as well, the challenge of actually developing ourselves in this kind of field, isn't it?
It is. I think in fairness, though, people are quite bought into it. If you go back when we first started, then, the concept of training was, if you think when most of us started boating, I boated in Poole Harbour for 15 years without ever knowing what anything is and never having a course. But nowadays in life, you join a company, you get a new job, you get trained how to do certain things in terms of your job of work. And I think the whole idea of undertaking training to further enhance your ability to do stumping is quite inbuilt nowadays. And I think people get it and they see the benefit of it. So I think the barrier to people coming to training, they don't see it as something that, it's just something I need to do and I'm not going to accrue a benefit from it. They really do get the benefit from it. And that in part may be because in the UK, because there isn't really mandatory licensing, we find people tend to engage very positively with training because they're not forced to do it. And I would say pretty much everybody going out buying a boat ends up doing it of their own free will, and that does make a big difference.
So, Paul, what's the season looking like for you as a business?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a fascinating one ever since COVID. COVID, I'm sure, as many marine businesses, many businesses full stop, COVID hit and we all thought, well, that's, might be the end of our businesses. And then the world went slightly mad, and everybody who could spell the word boat bought a boat, and everybody who couldn't bought a paddleboard, and the seas were full of boats, and that's continued really. Last year for the leisure market, was tough for a lot of people in terms of people's disposable income and such like, and that made a difference. So I think the number of boats being sold, and I think it's just back into now a more normal market of some really positive years and some less positive years. For us, as we say, we do a lot of leisure training, but we also do a lot of commercial, law enforcement, fire and rescue type stuff. So we're running right through the year. So that tends to sort of like flatten out things, and we're as busy as we possibly could be really. A lot of it is about making sure that our interaction with customers is as professional and as good as it can be, because with training businesses, they're fundamentally very small businesses, but yet our customers are expecting quite reasonably a John Lewis, a Waitrose type service from maybe one and a half of us dealing with the admin versus a huge department at somewhere like John Lewis or Amazon. So it's about managing expectations and delivering as best we can.
I'm now joined by Charlie Tullock, the principal of First Class Sailing. I asked Charlie to start us off by introducing himself and his Shamrock Quay based training centre.
We've been going for 20 plus years now, conducting RAA sailing courses and holidays and experiences that sort of build on the training that people get from doing RAA courses.
Just remind us as to where you're based, please, and the kind of courses that you offer.
So we're based in Shamrock, Quay in Southampton. We offer the full range of RAA cruising courses, so anything from competent crew, which is the beginner's course, through to yachtmaster offshore, then all the courses in between, so day skipper, coastal skipper and yachtmaster coastal prep.
And you've got a pretty impressive range of boats for people to get out on the water in, haven't you?
Yeah, we've got a variety. We've got anything from a westerly Fulmar, which is a 32-foot tiller steer that goes well for a couple, or two our slightly bigger boats. We've got Beneteau 38.1s, we've got Geno 12.5s that we use.
Why should people actually take advantage of a course with First Class Sailing, Charlie?
Training is it's a good thing to have. Anyone thinking of going boating should really consider doing a course. You're going to be safer. If you're wanting to skipper, then your crew are going to have a better time. You're going to find it more relaxing if you know what you're doing. Your crew are going to enjoy it more. You're going to be safer to yourself, to other people on the water. It just makes it more enjoyable.
What about then the way technology has changed and influenced boat training methods and resources over the years? In what ways has that changed?
Well, considerably. When I started learning to sail, GPS was very much on boats, and we've become more and more used to it and, reliant on it as well. Certainly when I started off training, we were very much looking at paper charts all the time. We were cross-checking our GPS position a lot. And that gradually has become less and less of a thing as people have sort of just grown used to the fact that it works, that it's okay. We always used to think, but what if the batteries go down and the GPS goes down, or the GPS gets turned off? But these days everyone's got their phones as well, and everyone has Savvy Navi or Navionics or something else on their phone. So we're starting to move away more from paper charts, and over the recent years, chart plotters have become much more of a thing and commonplace on boats, and everyone, when those started to appear, was sceptical and slightly nervous where they're getting the right information, but we've become more and more reliant on them as we've realised that they work. And I think training these days has become much more about pointing out the limitations and where things can go wrong, but just how to use them, how to read them correctly, these chart plotters, how to know when actually you could be getting spurious information.
And I think that's some of the things with these chart plotters is they build so much into them. You almost need a degree in computer science to actually really understand some of these chart plotters, but actually really what we're wanting is a very simple interactive use.
Yeah, and something that's perhaps standardised, and you can go from one boat to another and it's a different chart plotter. Half the thing with these chart plotters is the knobology of them, knowing where features are, how to find them. We're all so glued to our screens. Part of going sailing, for me anyway, is actually getting away from that and the opportunity not to look at a screen is quite refreshing. So they all have them, but our boats certainly still carry paper charts. Our training is very much, we are still looking at paper charts, but it's becoming more and more geared towards electronic charts.
But it's important that people come on a course and have at least a basic understanding of the electronics, as you say. But there is that whole thing with the paper chart about a sense of belonging, a sense of being in something when you get that bigger perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. You can lay a chart out on the chart table and you can see where you are and how you fit into the landscape around you. Yes, you get a much bigger picture by looking at a paper chart.
How do your instructors adapt their training programs? I'm thinking now about how they actually adapt them to work for both beginners and for more experienced boaters, because it really is a classic case of one size doesn't fit all, isn't it?
Yeah. So on the theory courses, day skipper theory and yachtmaster theory, there's a lot more emphasis on electronic charts and how to read them and apps and where to get the information from. It's a bit like forecasts. You get a forecast online. Do you just trust the one forecast, or do you actually get a few and kind of make an interpretation of all of them, or do you have one that you rely on? So it's with the training, it's just our instructors are kind of discussing apps, looking at apps, and students often come to a course and they've already got a tide table app on their phone, Savvy Navi or Navionics, so and they've got questions about it. So it's just looking at the stuff that's out there and kind of how it fits into a week's course, how they can use it. So they might look at the tide times for the day, then they might look at the almanac and just cross-reference it just to see that it is correct. A secondary port calculation, I mean, they're not difficult, but they're a lot easier looking on your phone and quicker. But I think part of it is doing it on your phone, and then perhaps on a course you might also look at it, on paper and just check that you've got it right and you understand how to do it and where the phone is getting its information from.
Yes, it's the understanding of the basic data, isn't it? You're absolutely right. And let's dig a bit deeper into that, Charlie, when you have a beginner coming to you and how the instructors run their courses for a beginner, and then how your instructors then run a course for those that have actually got a few more sea miles under their belts. And I'm talking now in just general boating terms.
Yeah, I mean, for a beginner, there's much more training, there's much more teaching involved. So the instructor will show a student how to do something, then encourage the student to have a go and sort of watch the student do it, and they can talk about it afterwards and improve on it, or the instructor can go over things again. Whereas when a more advanced student, there's much more of a sort of coaching element to it. There are many different ways to do things, and the instructor's role really is to stand back, and as long as it's safe, just let the student have a go and coach sort of where necessary, step in if necessary, or just at the end of it give some pointers. Ask questions, how could it be done differently, what went right, what could be improved on next time. So there's much more coaching at the advanced level, whereas it's sort of much more hands-on teaching at the more novice standard.
And I think it's about giving candidates, those learning, a chance to make a few mistakes, because let's face it, that's where most of us learnt what worked and what didn't.
Definitely. It's the best way to learn, by mistakes. By making those mistakes. And the instructor's really there just to sort of sit back and let those mistakes happen, as long as they're not going to dent the students' confidence. And our instructors are generally pretty good at stepping in before that happens.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the candidates you've had come through in the 20-odd years that you've been running first-class sailing. Can you share some of the stories or testimonials from past participants that highlight the effectiveness of your training?
We've had customers that come back and do multiple courses with us. A few kind of stick out. There was a couple that did a day skipper theory course with us. They met on that course. They then went on and did some practical courses. They then went on and bought a boat. They got married and they sailed off around the world, and that was 10 years ago. And recently I saw on some social media feed that they're at it again, cruising, and I think they're in the San Blas Islands or just gone through the Panama Canal. So, I mean, that's a lovely story when students learn and then they go on and really do something like that. We've had a number of students that have gone on and then learnt from scratch with us and then gone on to become instructors and teach for us, and that's really pleasing. And we also had loads of students that come and do 2 or 3 courses and then they go on and charter their own boat in the Med. And that's what it's really about. Once you've done some courses, you go and charter a boat, and then you really kind of, you're the learning curve just moves to another level when you're without an instructor, and that's always nice to see. Yeah, we've had lots of people that have come back over the years, and they've gone off and done, various adventures, and they come back and they just want to top up their knowledge or do the Ocean Yachtmaster course. Yeah, it's lovely to hear those kind of stories when people do that.
So, Charlie, you've got to ask the question of the principal of a sailing school. What on earth made you want to get started running a sailing school in the first place?
At the time, I was doing a job I wasn't particularly enjoying in London, dealing with cargoes, so it's marine insurance, dealing with cargoes of broccoli that had gone off. And a friend of mine was running a sailing school and said, come and get involved. And so I did. And at the time, I was doing lots of teaching on the water, and then gradually moved towards the office. And that's really how I got into it. I wanted to kind of be a bit more land-based, having done sort of 10, 15 years before that of deliveries and charter work. Yeah, so I just kind of naturally fell into it.
And where you're based there in Shamrock, Quay, you've got a pretty wide range of resources at your disposal. Just talk me through the operational centre, if you will, of first-class sailing.
We've got an office space, and then we've got a sort of reception area that we kind of grandly call an art gallery, because it's got some pictures on the wall. And then we've got 2 classrooms. One that could take, 15, 20 people. We've got a couple of diesel engines. We've got some VHF radios. We've got some sea survival equipment. And then we've got a slightly smaller classroom that's good for breakout sessions or VHF courses. And the good thing about courses here, you can discuss something in the classroom, and then you can go out in the yard and look at boats and kind of discuss different hull shapes or winches or sail rigging arrangements. So yeah, there's lots sort of on offer in this area.
Yeah, I think that's the point, isn't it? By getting close literally to the water, you can actually put some of the things you learn in the classroom quite quickly into action, practically. And that's really where a lot of us learn the most, don't we?
Yes, it's great to do it in the classroom, and a lot of stuff, it just isn't appropriate to cover on a boat. And indeed, on the 5-day courses that we run, there isn't time to go over all the navigational knowledge that you need. Much better to do that in the classroom and then go out on the boat and use it practically.
And a wide range of different instructors to suit the participants, because we're all individuals and some of us respond to different types of an approach. But you have a range of instructors who have many, many miles under their belt, don't you?
Yeah, we do. We have a great team of instructors. We generally choose them. They're sort of slightly maturer, perhaps. They don't necessarily do it sole method of income. So they've been relatively successful at other areas, at other things in life, and just bring a bit more kind of experience. They're great communicators, and they're passionate about sailing. They're not necessarily doing it every day, every week. So a lot of them own their own boats, and they're just really passionate about sailing and about imparting their knowledge to others.
Let's just conclude today's episode and look at how the season's shaping up for you and what sort of things you've got to look forward to.
Yeah, we've got a busy calendar ahead, lots of RA courses. We've also got mile building weekends over to the Channel Islands and Weymouth. We do boat handling weekends, med prep weekends. So anyone thinking of chartering a boat in the med, they're quite useful those weekends. We've got mile building trips, so 7-day mile building channel triangles, we call them, where you just go around the Channel, West Country, and then down to France or the Channel Islands and back. It's a good way to get miles. We've got holidays, so 5 or 7 day holidays down to the West Country or over to the Channel Islands. We've got a trip to Norway on a Challenger 72.
Right.
16-day trip in June. We've got a couple of boats entering the Fastnet race, FAR 40 and a Challenger 72. And that sort of involves a number of weekends doing some qualifying races and some training before the main race itself. A selection of shore-based courses, navigation courses, day skipper and yachtmaster, but also the supplementary ones like VHF radio, sea survival, first aid, offshore personal safety and diesel engine.
And of course, just remind us about the London connection for first class sailing, Charlie.
We started in London years ago. We specialise in going into the offices of companies in London, in the city area, and doing evening navigation classes. We also are the Cruising Association's training partner at CA House in Limehouse. So we run courses there as well, and not just the navigation courses, but the VHF and diesel and first aid and all the one-day courses.
As always, a huge thank you to all my guests for giving up their time. I hope you found what they had to say inspiring and informative. For more information of those featured in this episode, just follow the links on the show notes. Please do let me know your own thoughts to the areas we've talked about today, and hope you'll join me again soon for more from This Marina Life with MDL, the perfect berth for you and your boat.